In the 5 days since Larry Fink mentioned that sovereign wealth funds are going to look at potentially adding 2 to 5% Bitcoin allocation to all of their portfolios, we've had the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world up their exposure to MicroStrategy by a whopping 150%. And the largest nation state in the world is now adding a sovereign wealth fund when they've never had it before, and potentially going to add Bitcoin to that sovereign wealth fund. What does Larry Fink know about all of this here going together? And is Larry Fink potentially working with the US and Donald Trump? Well, first, let's hear what Donnie T had to say himself.
Next, this is an executive order. This charges your Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and your Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, to begin a process that will hopefully result in the creation of an American sovereign wealth fund.
It's a very exciting event. We're going to have a sovereign wealth fund, which we've never had. We have a lot of things that create wealth, and you're seeing that over the last 2 weeks. I think we've created more wealth. Other people have created de-wealth.
Donnie T always throwing some stabs in there. Other people have created de-wealth. That last little jab always gets me. But Donald Trump ordering the plan to start a United States sovereign wealth fund is extremely significant for a multitude of reasons, folks. One, because the United States has never had one, right? A sovereign wealth fund generally operates when a country is putting their excess money into something to see it grow. Well, the United States has been operating at a deficit ever since coming off that gold standard. Well, now they're looking to potentially limit the spending by the Doge and create this sovereign wealth fund. But what's going to be in this sovereign wealth fund, I think, makes it very, very interesting here, where, we're having this controversy back and forth about TikTok. We know Donald Trump has had his fair share of crypto tokens here recently with Trump coin, Melania coin, Barron coin, you name it. I'll give those meme coins a big red candle. But on the flip side of things, Trump is talking about potentially buying TikTok and putting it in the sovereign wealth fund. So what has Donald Trump really realized during this time and he's in office? He's realized that, hey, Bitcoin and crypto to a lesser extent is here to stay. It's something that we need to focus on. So could Bitcoin be in that sovereign wealth fund? And is that what Larry Fink was talking about? And on top of that, are there going to be more tech stocks? Is there going to be more risk taken along those lines? Well, let's listen in to what Larry Fink had to say not too long ago here, folks, about sovereign wealth funds looking at Bitcoin as a 2 to 5% allocation.
The question is, could you see a 2 or 5% allocation? I was with a sovereign wealth fund during this week, and that was the conversation. Should we have a 2% allocation? Should we have a 5% allocation? If everybody adopted that conversation, it would be 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 for Bitcoin.
Now, I'm extremely bullish just watching that because of everything that he's lining out. And on top of that, Larry Fink saying the quiet parts out loud. Is Bitcoin going to skyrocket to 500,000, 600,000, maybe even 700,000 a coin? And what are we going to see if sovereign wealth funds really start to implement a Bitcoin strategy? He talked about that there's a $14 trillion collapse that could potentially boost the price of Bitcoin. So why is Larry Fink talking about this at Davos? And why all of a sudden is the U.S., there was no talks of potentially pre-election, the U.S. creating a sovereign wealth fund. Now all of a sudden they're creating one. And with their priviness to crypto, is Bitcoin going to be a part of that? I think it's an interesting conversation, and and I'm not the only one saying it, folks. You might be saying here, hey, Brandon, you're absolutely crazy. There's going to be no Bitcoin strategic reserve. There's going to be no Bitcoin in the sovereign wealth fund from the United States. Well, I'm not the only one thinking this way, that Trump's sovereign wealth fund is likely to include crypto at a certain extent. Trump's plan might be to acquire Bitcoin without bureaucracy, meaning instead of looking at a Bitcoin strategic reserve, Trump is going to buy Bitcoin using this sovereign wealth fund. So he signed that executive order yesterday about creating this sovereign wealth fund. And given the current administration's well-articulated support of digital assets, it is highly likely that the sovereign wealth fund announced today will include Bitcoin and possibly other US-made digital assets to provide the true economic utility, such as Ether. We'll leave that one off the side there, but there is some interesting aspects of this because sovereign wealth funds now have been talking about potentially adding Bitcoin. So who are some of these big players? We all know Norway is the largest sovereign wealth fund, and we're going to get into Norway here in a second, why that is significant. But these sovereign wealth funds are absolutely massive. I mean, look at the money being thrown around here. There's 1.3 trillion here in the Norway government pension fund. And then we've got China, but everybody's been a little bit wary on China, but we'll get into China and why that could be potentially significant here in a second. And then we also see Saudi Arabia, the BRICS nations, a lot of energy dense countries now really starting to get into Bitcoin. So I mentioned Norway. Why is Norway important? Well, we've got Norway significantly adding to their stack of MicroStrategy. Now, why is this important? Well, MicroStrategy, as many of you know, Michael Saylor, the man, the myth, the legend, the Giga Chad himself, is potentially the biggest Bitcoin bull that there is. He's been implementing that famous MicroStrategy flywheel in order to bring more Bitcoin on that balance sheet. So if Norway is increasing its exposure to Bitcoin, they're doing it indirectly with MicroStrategy. So maybe they are worried to an extent of, hey, we don't want to add Bitcoin directly the asset, but we want some exposure to Bitcoin. So what's the next best thing if we can't do the ETFs or something along those lines? Well, it's MicroStrategy. So it is really going it's really going to where, we're seeing all of these. So now we're also seeing it here. They've grown their indirect exposure, not by a little bit, by 1.5 times here, folks, where we're seeing a lot of the sovereign wealth funds start to continually stack Bitcoin and either get some exposure in some way, shape, or form. And that exposure here is looking like it is through MicroStrategy, at least through Norway. Now, what is another sovereign wealth fund that I have talked about here briefly? Well, it's Qatar and the UAE. Why are they so significant? There's rumors surrounding Qatar and other Middle East countries have already announced making moves into Bitcoin mining, and Saudi Arabia and Oman have already invested billions into Bitcoin mining. So are these rumors growing true? And are we going to see a lot of state-sponsored Bitcoin mining start to come through as well? I mean, we're seeing kind of the signs here. We're seeing El Salvador rapidly stack. We're seeing the United States, just separate states, now really look for a Bitcoin strategic reserve. It seems like nation state FOMO is hitting everyone and hitting everyone very quickly, including those sovereign wealth funds. So on top of all that, we've got the United States potentially hinting at the latest executive order that could mean the US is buying Bitcoin. We have the GOAT of the Bitcoin community, Senator Cynthia Lummis. That's Lummis rhymes with hummus for all my Greek brethren out there. So where that sovereign wealth fund is, quote, a big deal for Bitcoin because Trump could potentially, after signing that executive order, put Bitcoin on the sovereign wealth fund balance sheet. So I think that it's going to be absolutely electric when the U.S. sovereign wealth fund announces that they're going to start buying Bitcoin. I mean, just imagine that, folks. The U.S. sovereign wealth fund will start stacking Bitcoin and not have to avoid all and can avoid all the bureaucracy that could potentially come with a strategic reserve. So the U.S. would be creating potentially one of the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world. Start stacking. We've got plenty of other big players like the states here starting to stack Bitcoin and others, and that executive order is just making waves out here. We could potentially see this executive order now quickly start to make this Bitcoin buying from the United States happen very quickly. Within the next 12 months, we're going to monetize the asset side of the US balance sheet for the American people. It will be a combination of liquid assets and assets that we have in this country as we work to bring them in for the American people. It's going to create value and be of great strategic importance. And I think that's absolutely massive, right? What are some of the key phrases they use in that? Liquid. What is the most liquid market on the planet? It's easy. It's Bitcoin. So it seems like it's a match made in heaven here, and that this is going to continue to buy here. And we're seeing more sovereign wealth funds, more countries start to get into Bitcoin. Whether that's Bitcoin mining, all of these countries are now starting to get some sort of exposure, right? So I think here is something interesting that I've noticed as well, is that we've got China's sovereign wealth fund being one of the largest in the world, just behind Norway. Now, what is rumored to be a proxy of China and their sovereign wealth fund? Well, the Kingdom of Bhutan, who has been quietly stacking in the background, and this tiny country has now built up a $750 million Bitcoin mining operation, which is nothing to sneeze at, folks. I think that this is going to continue. We're seeing a Bitcoin's arms race. The Bitcoin FOMO of nation states is going absolutely bananas, and 2025 is set up to be an absolutely electric year for the Bitcoin community and everybody involved. And we're seeing just how rapidly the GDP of Kingdom of Bhutan is rising because of the implementation of Bitcoin. So the one unique aspect of this is we're not quite seeing that price run up exactly like we would see before. We are seeing the January kind of crab walk in here, but one interesting aspect is we're seeing the hash rate absolutely go parabolic here, folks. I mean, look at this. The price crab walking, generally, it seems to follow the same trend, but the hash rate here is absolutely exploding, and we're not seeing any type of pressure to the upside when it comes to the price. Now, why is that? Is something going to happen here? Is some Bitcoin price going to pop here in the near future? I mean, it looks like all signs are pointing in that direction, just like signs are pointing in the direction of the United States potentially buying some sort of Bitcoin and having some sort of exposure to it here in the near future. So I'm going to go take a look at the chat here. As we've got Robert Manila here saying, I want BRICS money. I don't want Warren Buffett and Elon Musk's junk Bitcoin. Hey, man, if all of them are going to start to come into Bitcoin, I think all roads lead to that orange road, right? All roads lead to Bitcoin. So I think that that's going to, continue here first. As my man All Night Hider in the chat is always one to participate. So I really appreciate him. He says, smoke that like Cheech and Chong. Get that roach going and smoke that like for your boy. And then we've got Jill here saying green candle is lit. So I really appreciate you joining here, Jill, because I'm getting jacked up seeing that we're seeing Bitcoin float around 96,000 here, folks. It seems like it's a good opportunity to buy, especially with the things that I just lined out here, where we're seeing hash rate climb at a rapid pace, but we're seeing price go down by 5% because because the digital asset manager, the crypto administration did not outwardly say, hey, we are going to create a Bitcoin strategic reserve here. So we're seeing a 5% drop here today. But that means that's a great buying opportunity here, folks, because Bitcoin and Bitcoiners have realized that there's been so much corruption in the world and that our dollar is fading by the wayside. One of the biggest issues that I've realized is that the fiat underlying currency has corrupted so many industries. Now, one of those industries that I think is just absolutely insane is the health insurance industry. Now, that's why I have partnered with CrowdHealth. You guys can go to joincrowdhealth.com if you guys are an entrepreneur, single, if you don't have health insurance provided by your company. Hell, even if you do, I would recommend going to CrowdHealth because you can find awesome doctors. They'll negotiate your bills and they'll help fund those bills with you guys with a great community. You'll join me and many of others here in the CrowdHealth community. You can sign up here and then use promo code Green Candle. You'll get 99, though it'll cost you 99 big ones for the first 3 months, saving you 50 smackers a month, and you can get started. And you could join that CrowdHealth community. They will give you some peace of mind when you're seeing this Bitcoin price dip. You don't have to worry about the price dipping because you've got your health insurance and everything else all covered up, because we are seeing some of the most bullish news that I have ever seen in my life for the Bitcoin community, all here in 2025. And it's all happened within the past 3 months. Since Donald Trump has become the president-elect and now president, we've seen some of the most bullish things, and people who were very anti-Bitcoin now flip the script and get very bullish towards Bitcoin, right? So I can't believe that we're seeing people actually try to sell off Bitcoin and be bearish about it at this point. As my man Down Under Blue says, it says all this bullish news and metrics, and the Bitcoin CEO won't raise prices. That damn CEO, man. What are you doing here? Pump our bags for us. I'm just kidding. I think it's a great opportunity, like I've said, to buy Bitcoin at a cheaper price, because like we're saying here, Larry Fink is talking about the potential to sovereign wealth funds to allocate 2 to 5%. Now, what can happen if that were to be the case? He was even saying you'd have 500, 600, 700,000 a coin. Bitcoin's price would absolutely skyrocket. So, as my man Cascader saying in the chat, BlackRock, White Rock, Gray Rock, Bitcoin don't care. Honey Badger powers through. Amen to that, boys and girls. Why don't you guys spam some of these green candles or some of the candle emojis in the chat? I always love it when I see those popping through. But I also think that it's absolutely massive that we're seeing this right here, that we're seeing people openly say, hey, Trump's sovereign wealth fund is likely to include crypto, some expert might say. Trump's plan to acquire Bitcoin without bureaucracy is coming from the sovereign wealth fund's creations. Others have pointed out that the fund could offer the Trump administration a less onerous path to gain exposure to the cryptocurrency. Trump may be setting up alternatives like this sovereign wealth fund to acquire Bitcoin without the bureaucracy. So it seems like no matter what he can do, he is worried about Bitcoin being potentially blocked by some bureaucrats. And they are going to 100% try to find some way in order to buy Bitcoin and keep this from keeping on. So I think that when there's a will, there's a way, folks. Donnie T, the man, the myth, the legend, as many of you know I love to say, is going to find a way to buy Bitcoin and put it on the United States balance sheet. So sovereign wealth funds, which collectively hold more than $13 trillion of assets under management, have been long used by wealthy nations like Norway, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar to reinvest surplus funds, advance strategic priorities, and diversify a nation's assets. So I think this is absolutely huge here. Given Trump's crypto focus, it's possible that this fund can be used to purchase Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that were deemed important for turning America into a crypto powerhouse. And I think that is a huge, huge takeaway during all of this, is that Donald Trump, he wants to be the first Bitcoin president. He wants his name to go down in history. He wants people to know, hey, shining lights. He's got the orange man here. He's got the flow going. He's like, hey, look at this. I'm going to be the first one to make a move like this and take a risk, buy Bitcoin and put it on the balance sheet, where many other nations are not doing that. Many other people are running from Bitcoin instead of embracing the tech community. So I think that this is going to be absolutely huge. We want Donnie T to keep it going. And President Trump has been hinting at this for the last several months, where the President Trump controls in the neighborhood of $500 million worth of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin and several hundred millions worth of Ethereum, guaranteed that the action is all but assured. So with all this being said, I think that this time is coming here. I think that Bitcoin is coming up, and the green candles are about to start popping here. We're going to see some electricity in the air when it comes to the Bitcoin space. And I think that with all this being said, 2025 is going to be a electric year, to say the very least here. So I appreciate you guys all joining me, all 311 of you, all on YouTube and in Twitter. It's been one of the best shows that I think I've put on here, or one of the biggest chats that we've had going. So I appreciate all the candles being spammed in the chat, the likes, and everything else. So thank you guys all for joining me. Smash the like button like Cheech and Chong, like my man All Nighter Hider always says. Hit the subscribe button, tell a friend to tell a friend, and join the green candle movement before it's too late, folks, because Bitcoin is about to get on this train and leave so many behind.